Thank you both very much for that. There's a lot of people that go through a lot of moments in life. Really awesome to know that we've got a group of people that have come together. The size this church is, and all the hearts are connected to each other. And when you're going through a tough time, maybe a mom and daughter will get up there and sing a song that means something to you. We've got an amazing group of people here. Thank you guys so much for that song. Look at that title right there. Isn't that how we've always heard that? Putting the cart before the horse. This morning I'd like to discuss what seems to be one of the most unfair and unkind acts of God recorded in Scripture. A lot of times when you read the Old Testament, if you don't have an understanding of what's going on, sometimes it hits you real wrong. This is one of those stories in the Bible that for years I struggled with because it just seems so ungodlike what he does here, and so unfair when you look at this story. The newspapers would have probably headlined this story. The article would have probably been read something like this: a man who was trying to protect the Ark of the Covenant was struck down by God today for no apparent reason. That is how this story would have come across in the newspaper. This guy was trying to help and God killed him. And we don't know why, it just seemed to happen. This is one of these stories in the Bible that you read, and if there's no explanation, if there's no understanding of what's going on, it just seems so wrong. It just seems unfair that God would even do this. This man's name was Uzzah, and his story is rather disturbing. But every once in a while, I like to dive into the controversial stuff because, I don't know, it gives me that warm, fuzzy feeling inside, you know, when we get to dig deeper in God's Word on those topics too. This is one of those topics where you read the story and it just sets wrong. It hits you all wrong. God, why did you do this? The guy's just trying to help. And then you killed him for doing something which seemed to be a really nice thing to do, and God was not pleased. The Ark of the Covenant was a sacred piece of furniture in the nation of Israel. And for those of you that don't know much about the Ark of the Covenant, I'd like to give you a quick recap this morning on what that is. We do have a picture here of it's a drawing of what the Ark of the Covenant would look like, somewhat what it would have looked like. The Ark of the Covenant was a box made out of acacia wood, and it was plated with gold on the inside and the outside. It had 4 rings on the bottom, towards the bottom of the Ark there, and 2 on both sides on the bottom to hold the 2 poles. There'd be a pole put through these 2 rings on each side of the ark. On the lid of the box was a mercy seat with a cherub or an angel on each side. And the angels would face the mercy seat and extend their wings over the mercy seat. God told the children of Israel that he would meet them above the mercy seat between the angels. That's where the Shekinah glory of God would shine when he was speaking to his people, which would have been an amazing thing to see. But this is where God would meet the children of Israel, is right there between the 2 angels above the mercy seat right on top of the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was a symbol of God's presence with his people. Now, before we get too deep into our text this morning, I also want to give you a little bit of history of what's going on before we read the story. The Philistines have previously stolen the Ark of the Covenant. It belongs in Israel. It belongs in the center of the tabernacle at the time, which would be the temple later. But it's supposed to be in the center of Israel's worship, right there in the center of the temple or the center of the tabernacle. But the Philistines have come in and they have stolen the Ark of the Covenant. And it's been missing for several years. And David is now king of Israel, and he wants to get it back. He wants the Ark of the Covenant back where it belongs. So he leads the armies of Israel into the Philistines' camp and ends up defeating the Philistines. Now there's only one thing left to do: get the Ark of the Covenant back to where it belongs. The Philistines are defeated. The war is over. They now have access to the Ark of the Covenant, and they need to bring this thing back to Israel where it belongs, put it right in the middle of the tabernacle where it's supposed to be. So let's look at our text this morning and start reading in verse 1 of 2 Samuel chapter 6. It says, "Again, David gathered all the choice men of Israel, 30,000. And David arose and went with all the people who were with him from Baal Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, whose name is called by the name the Lord of Hosts, who dwells between the cherubim. So they set the ark on a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the new cart. So here we go. They go up to get the cart, or the Ark of the Covenant. They get this thing and they put it on a new cart, and they are traveling back to Israel with this thing. The enemy's been defeated. The ark has been retrieved, and now they're beginning their journey home. 30,000 Israelites. It says 30,000 Israelites come to get this thing. That's quite a large group of people. And they're about to celebrate the fact that the ark, the symbol of God's presence in Israel, was coming home. They placed the Ark of the Covenant on a new cart, and Uzzah and Ahio are in the driver's seat. And this is quite a day of celebration. Look at the scene with me in the next verse, verse 4 of chapter 6 here. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, accompanying the ark of God. And Ahio went before the ark. Then David and all the house of Israel played music before the Lord on all kinds of instruments of fir wood, on harps, on stringed instruments, on tambourines, on sistrums, and on cymbals. This would have been a very loud celebration. Think, there's 30,000 people here. They're playing all these different kinds of instruments. 30,000 people have just gone into party mode. I mean, they've got the Ark of the Covenant back. It's going back to where it belongs. They put this thing on a new cart, and they are getting ready to go back. On the way back, they are celebrating. So see the heart of, I'm going to paint this, I'm going to make this even worse than the Bible makes it look. I want to build this up to see the controversy in the story here. These people have gone out to get what belongs to Israel, something that represents the presence of God among his people. They are celebrating that they finally defeated their enemies, and now they've got the Ark of the Covenant, and it's going back to where it belongs. They bring instruments because they know they're going to bring this thing back, and it is a time of celebration. They are partying. 30,000 people are in party mode right now. And this would be a huge scene here. This would attract the attention of anybody that's nearby. Can you imagine going down the road with 30,000 people playing instruments and they're all in party mode? You're going to attract attention. And anybody that sees or hears them knows there's something big going on here. They want the whole world to know the Ark of the Covenant is back with Israel. But the very next verse, we see that the party comes to a very abrupt stop. Look at verse 6. And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. Then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there by the ark of God. Uzzah's party just ended, and so did everybody else's party. It's all done. They're celebrating. 30,000 people are celebrating because the Ark of the Covenant's going back home. The ox stumbles. It says the reason why the Ark of the Covenant was falling wasn't because something was wrong with the cart, but because the ox stumbles. Uzzah sees that the Ark of the Covenant is tipping, and he reaches up to stabilize this thing. You can't even look at Uzzah and say, shame on you. You can't... It's exactly what we would have done. If something's tipping and you could stabilize it, most of us would. Not very many people would step back and go, oh, let's see what happens. No, you're going to try to stabilize it. And that's what Uzzah is doing here. The children of Israel are so happy that the Ark of the Covenant is finally getting back in the hands of God's people. They're celebrating and unashamed of it traveling down the road. They are clearly not embarrassed at all. They are making loud noise. They are playing instruments. They are cheering. And as they're traveling, one of the oxen stumbles, and Uzzah reaches up to stabilize the Ark of the Covenant. He doesn't want this thing to fall. And right then, God strikes him down, and he dies next to the Ark of the Covenant. And he doesn't only die, God kills him. It's starting to look bad for the home team. Why? God's having a bad day. It looks like God's really not happy right now, and we can't see a good reason why he's not happy. What in the world's going on here? I'm going to say this story could use a little bit of explanation because we're not going to just read this thing and go, okay, well, you know, God's God. He can kill whoever he wants to anytime he wants to, so I guess he's good. No, we need a little bit of an explanation because not one of us would say, well, you know what, it is what it is. I mean, he is God. He can do whatever he wants, which is true. But then when you start thinking of the character of God, God loving, not willing that any should perish, all those other things, then you got a few questions popping up here, and it would help to have an explanation. This is one of those places in the Bible where most people get the idea that God is a God of wrath and he's ready to strike us down at the smallest little mess up. You got the picture of the God with a long white beard sitting on the cloud holding a lightning bolt, just waiting to smite us. That's the picture. This story does not help. That it gives us one of those pictures like, wow, Uzzah reaches out, stabilizes the Ark of the Covenant, God toasts him. Yeah, and we say, oh, but God's not up there waiting to strike us down at the littlest thing. Well, that story really doesn't help. It actually helps defend that argument. This account actually upsets people. But don't worry if it upsets you because you're not alone. Look at David's response in this in verse 8. It says, and David became angry because of the Lord's outbreak against Uzzah, and he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah to this day. David is not mad at Uzzah because he did something wrong here. It tells us what David's upset about. It says that he's mad because of the Lord's outbreak or God's outbursts against Uzzah. He even calls the place Perez Uzzah, which means the breaking down of Uzzah. The location that they are, that's the name of the location now. This is where God struck down Uzzah. This is where God's outburst went against him. And he names the place this. David's not happy, and he's not mad at Uzzah. He's actually upset with God. Which all of us share that a little bit when we're looking at this story. David was shocked and displeased with what happened. And all Uzzah was trying to do was help protect the Ark of the Covenant from hitting the ground, and now he's dead. When we look at stories like this, it shakes us up a bit. This one's a hard one to wrap your mind around. Not only did this event upset David, it also caused him to be afraid, and I really don't blame him. Uzzah reaches out, stabilizes the Ark of the Covenant. God kills Uzzah. Now David's not only mad, he's also afraid. But because of his fear, the whole process of returning the Ark of the Covenant to its proper home was put on hold. Look at verse 9 here. David was afraid of the Lord that day, and he said, how can the Ark of the Lord come to me? So David would not move the Ark of the Lord with him into the city of David. But David took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. The Ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom for the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. David was pretty shaken up by what happened to Uzzah, and I'm thinking all of us would be. So he ends up storing the Ark of the Covenant in the home of a man named Obed-Edom for 3 months. For 3 months. Remember, the Ark's on the way home. And now the Ark's not on the way home. Now we're going to put it into storage. We're going to put it in this guy's house for 3 months. And it almost seems like Mr. Obed-Edom is a guinea pig here. If nothing bad happens to this guy, isn't this a good heart right here? We're just going to store it in your house. If nothing bad happens to this guy, maybe we'll take it the rest of the way home. But right now, we're just going to put this thing into storage. Mr. Obed-Edom, you get to hold on to this. If you're okay, we'll come back and get it. And that's exactly what happens. Look at verse 12 here. Now it was told King David, saying, the Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him, because the ark of God. So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with gladness. And so it was, when those bearing the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, that he sacrificed oxen and fatted sheep. The party's back on. Every 3 months later, the party is back on. David realizes that God is still in the business of blessing. So he goes and retrieves the Ark of the Covenant, and it says he does it with gladness. Party time, we're back in party mode. We're going to go get the Ark of the Covenant, and we're going to bring it home. And he even makes a sacrifice, and he worships God. Everything's good, and the story has a happy ending. The end. Wasn't that a good story? Now, the problem is the story might have a happy ending, but it also has one really big unanswered question. And I think all of us are still sitting here with that unanswered question. Why did God kill Uzzah for trying to stabilize the Ark of the Covenant? Yeah, good. I'm glad everybody's happy in the end. They get the Ark of the Covenant home. That's fantastic. One question. Why is Uzzah dead? Why did God kill Uzzah? And I want to show why this was a problem according to the law, what Uzzah did. But I would then like to take a little bit of time and dig a little bit deeper to show why it was a problem relationally also. This is not just a story about a man who touched a box and was killed. It's actually a story about someone who was neglected by the ones he loved. Let's take a look back in the book of Numbers to see how the Ark of the Covenant was supposed to be transported. Numbers chapter 4 and verse 5 says, "When the camp prepares to journey, Aaron and his sons shall come, and they shall take down the covering veil and cover the ark of the testimony with it. Then they shall put on it a covering of badger skins, and spread over that a cloth entirely of blue, and they shall insert its poles." Before the Ark of the Covenant was transported, the priests were to take down the veil, and they were to lay it over top of the ark. Then they were supposed to cover that with a covering of badger skins, and then place a blue cloth over top of that. The Ark of the Covenant was supposed to have 3 layers of protection on it before the poles were put through the rings at the bottom so that the ark could be carried. Those poles were so people could carry the Ark of the Covenant. But before the poles were even put through so they could carry it, this thing was supposed to be covered 3 times. Once the priests had finished covering everything, the sons of Kohath would carry it. Look at Numbers chapter 4 and verse 15. "And when Aaron and his sons have finished covering the sanctuary and all its furnishings of the sanctuary, when the camp is set to go, then the sons of Kohath shall come to carry them, but they shall not touch any holy thing lest they die." Don't touch it. Do not touch it. This covering was not only to protect the Ark of the Covenant, it was also supposed to protect the ones carrying the Ark of the Covenant. If you cover the Ark of the Covenant, you're not going to touch the Ark of the Covenant. They're not supposed to touch it. The reason why the Ark of the Covenant, you say, what's the problem here? It's a box. Why is God so upset that if they touch a box? Why is that a big bad thing? Here's the problem. You look in the Old Testament and you've got this picture all throughout the Old Testament. God is holy and our sin cannot approach God. You see, the priests are the only ones able to go in because they're a mediator between God and the people. There's only a certain person that can go to look at the Ark of the Covenant, to touch the Ark of the Covenant, was a priest, a mediator between God and man. Later on, Jesus Christ is our high priest, the mediator between God and man. He's the only reason we are now able to approach God at all, is the high priest mediated between the two and open the veil so we could go straight to God. There's a picture here, and God wants them to remember your sin cannot approach the holiness of God. So he says, don't even touch it. because I want you to remember the problem we have here. We are separated because of sin. So he wants Israel to know this is the problem and this is the imagery I'm showing you. So don't even touch the Ark of the Covenant. They were not to touch it. And it was supposed to be transported by men who carried it using the poles that were provided. But the covering also protected them in another way. Look at verse 20 of Numbers chapter 4. But they shall not go in and watch while the holy things are being covered, lest they die. Remember, the priest, Jesus was the only one that could go to God the Father. He was our high priest. He's the only one that could approach God. The priest is the only one that's able to go in and cover everything. Everybody else, don't even go in. You can't look at it. Don't touch it. It's the picture of the separation between God and man, and Jesus is the only one that can go to God. And he did that on our behalf, and now we can go to God because of what he did. This is the picture. So they're not able to touch it. They're not able to look at it lest they die. The only people who were allowed to approach the Ark of the Covenant were the priests. After the priests had covered it, the ark would be carried in the same way that other nations would carry their kings. And maybe you've seen that with China and India and stuff like that, where the people would carry the poles, and then there would be like a little gazebo sitting on top of those poles, and the king would be in there. They would carry him. He was not on a cart. He wasn't on some vehicle. No, the people would carry that moving gazebo, and the king would be inside of this thing. They would exalt him and lift him high, exalt the fact that they serve this king. And God says, I want you to carry the Ark of the Covenant just like that. Just the way the other kings are represented, I want you to represent me as your king. I want you to carry the Ark of the Covenant that way. This would let all who see it know that God was ultimately the true king of Israel. So let's look back at Uzzah's situation a little bit closer. Let's see what's going on here with Uzzah. The Philistines have the Ark of the Covenant for many years. And I guarantee you that they are not trying to honor God with the way they handle it. We know that because you can look at the story of when the Philistines have the Ark of the Covenant. Does it seem like they're trying to show any reverence to it at all? Absolutely not. But now Israel has it back in their possession, and they know exactly what to do with it. But that's not what they do. They know what to do. They know how to treat it, but that's not what they do. The Philistines had placed the Ark of the Covenant on a cart. They've placed this thing on a cart, but the Israelites decide to change things up because that's not good enough for their God. So look at what they do. 2 Samuel 6 and verse 3. So they set the Ark of God on a new cart. Well, that ought to fix things. That's better, right? You know, you put it on an old cart. We see our God as better than an old cart, so we're going to put God on a new cart. How are they supposed to carry this? How are they supposed to transport the Ark of the Covenant? They're supposed to carry it, let the king be high and lifted up, and exalt it. What do? They put it on a new cart. Well, that'll show him some more reverence. This old cart's not good enough for our God. We'll throw it on a new cart. Now we're going to lift things up a little bit more here. The Ark of the Covenant was never supposed to be transported on a cart. It was supposed to be carried using the poles. A cart was used for cargo. That is what a cart is used for. It's used for cargo. It was used for something that was just seen as a possession. That's what the cart would be for. The Ark of the Covenant was known as the presence of God. Even the Philistines understood this and ended up placing it on the floor in front of their idol Dagon to show that their God had defeated Israel's God. They understand that the Ark of the Covenant represents the true God of Israel. So let's lay it on the floor in front of our God like it's bowing down to our God, which that's an interesting story if you ever want to read it. God pushes Dagon over, so he's bowing in front of the Ark of the Covenant twice, which is an awesome picture. But even the Philistines know that this represents God. That's what this Ark of the Covenant's for. Israel and all the surrounding nations knew that God visited his people on the Ark of the Covenant. They understand this. Now God is being represented like a piece of cargo on the back of a cart rather than being exalted as the true King of Israel. Israel was supposed to carry this ark in reverence. They didn't even carry their own king David like that. The Ark of the Covenant was supposed to be carried in a greater way than even they treated their earthly king. David wasn't even treated this way. The whole world was supposed to know that God was ultimately the king, the true king of Israel, even above their earthly king. Now God's being carried on the back of a cart looking like some possession, some trophy that the Israelites have. And that is a huge problem. God was always supposed to be seen as the one who the entire nation of Israel served, including the king. Now he's being advertised as a piece of cargo or just possession that belongs to the Israelites. And when the oxen stumbled, Uzzah reaches out to touch the ark, which, by the way, shouldn't have even been exposed enough to touch. And he dies. David ends up getting upset and distancing himself from the ark for 3 months. But after he sees that Obed-Edom is receiving grace, he comes back to get it. And I want you to notice how they transport the Ark of the Covenant this time. Look at the next verse here in verse 13. And so it was, when those bearing the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, they sacrificed oxen and fatted sheep. Look at that. They're carrying the Ark of the Covenant now. Suddenly it's not just a piece of cargo, but they see it as the actual presence of God with them. Now they're carrying it. Who told you to carry it? Uzzah dies, you get upset with God. It's on the back of a cart. Now when you come back to get it, now you're carrying it. Who told you to switch plans? Nobody. We're just doing what we should have been doing in the first place. We're going to do it right this time. Israel never carried the Ark of the Covenant on the back of a cart again. Never is it recorded that they threw it on the back of a cart. They learned their lesson. A lot of times people look at this story and they see God, a God who overreacted to a small little act of disobedience. But that is not what's happening here. Before I tell you how God was absolutely right in his decision, let me reveal a couple of things that are not mentioned in the story, but are definitely there. Israel should have been punished for displaying God in an unholy manner. 30,000 people. They were all doing this together. They should have all been punished. They were not exalting him as the one true God, but as a trophy that they had won. All 30,000 people were doing it. They knew the proper way to carry it, and they chose to carry it an easier way. And by the way, a cart is a whole lot easier than carrying something on your shoulders. So they chose the easier way. Also, Uzzah should have never been able to touch the ark in the first place. He might have been able to touch one of the coverings, but he shouldn't have been able to touch the ark in the first place. It was supposed to be covered with 3 separate coverings. This was not only to protect someone from touching it, but would also protect them from looking at it. And that takes us to the third observation here. There are 30,000 people who are already looking at an uncovered ark, who were not supposed to be able to look on the ark and live. Before we get too upset over this God of wrath, let's recognize this God of mercy. A lot of people get caught up in this story and say, oh, God just overreacted here. One guy dies among a group of 30,000 that should have died, and we're upset about a God of wrath. I think we should focus on a God of mercy, because that's a lot of mercy being poured out here. 30,000 men could have died that day because of the fact that they were not only handling the ark improperly, but they were also able to see and touch the ark. God's desire was clearly not to bring death and destruction to these people. It was to bring them back in the relationship as it was meant to be. The death of Uzzah was a wake-up call and a reminder to the nation of Israel where God was supposed to be, not only symbolically, but in their hearts. God was their God, and they were God's people. But they had allowed the day-to-day activities of life to get in their way of their true relationship with God. They had forgotten about the honor he deserved and the thanksgiving that they should have been showing God the whole time. God had become a last resort option, a piece of cargo, something you unpack only when you need it. That's who God had become to the nation of Israel. And God valued his people and did not want their focus to drift away. So he had to do something to get their attention. But we cannot overlook how much long suffering he also showed, how much grace he displayed through this whole story. Because it could have been a lot worse, and he would have been justified to do that. But he only took down one guy. And it woke everybody up, because the next time they moved the cart, they did it like this. They carried it. They exalted him because they got the relationship back in track. This story is an incredible reminder of what can happen if we do not invest ourselves into our relationship with God. I am thankful that I have a relationship with God, but it's also my job to invest myself in that relationship. No relationship can be carried by one person. Both sides need to invest into that relationship. We can become so complacent. You, me, we can all become so complacent that we only go to God when a crisis hits or we feel like we could use a little bit of help. And I've been there in my life. I kneel down to pray because finances are bad, or because somebody's health is bad, or because my situation's getting a little bumpy, and then I turn to God. Hey, God, and then I realized, man, I haven't talked to him in a long time. When was the last time I talked to God? Oh, it was the last crisis. That's when I talked to God last time. But I really need his help right now because I'm in another crisis. And what I did in my own life is I treated God like something I unpacked in an emergency. He was like a survivor's kit. I opened it up when I needed his help. But what did I do between crises? I forgot about him. I forgot to keep my relationship the way it was supposed to be with God. And I treated him like he was on the back of a cart, and I can unpack him anytime I needed him, but then he goes back in the box till the next crisis. The Ark of the Covenant was always kept in the very center of the temple. Well, the temple has changed. The temple has changed. It's no longer a building in the Middle East. God relocated himself to a different temple. 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 16. Do you not know that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? By the way, if you're saved here this morning, that's you. God's relocated. New temple. Right here in this room. God's temple. He moved. He moved into the hearts of his people. He's not just in a tabernacle. He's not just in a temple represented by a box. No, because of what Jesus Christ did, he got to move right inside of us. Do you not know that you are the temple of God? And the Spirit of God dwells in you? God chose to relocate into your heart, not because it was a nicer home, but because you were there. That is why he moved. Because he wants to be with you. He loves you and he wants you to love him in return. Israel had become so caught up with everything going on that they neglected to grow in their relationship with God. David learned a lot through the death of Uzzah. It was a hard lesson to learn, but he eventually got it. Look at what David says in Psalms chapter 5. David, he got it. Psalms chapter 5 and verse 3. My voice you shall hear in the morning, O Lord. In the morning I will direct it to you, and I will look up. Rather than growing complacent in life, David determined to direct his attention upward at the very start of every day. God, before I move into this day today, I'm going to take some time with you because I do not want to grow complacent. I do not want to neglect my relationship with you. So in the morning, God, you're going to hear my voice. In the morning, we're going to take some time together because otherwise I know what I can do. Done it before. And I don't want to distance myself from you. I don't want to grow complacent. And I want to stay close. It's summertime. There's a lot of vacations and activities going on right now. There are a lot of projects that need to be done around the house that we normally don't do in the wintertime, but we can do now in the summertime. But Satan knows that if we can become busy enough, we can also become distracted with what needs to be done spiritually. We can get so wrapped up in life that we forget to grow in Christ. We can get so caught up in the day-to-day events that we forget to take any time with God at all. And the longer you do that, the next time you pray, you'll realize, man, I haven't prayed to God since the last crisis. What happened between the two crises? Where was I? I was fixing my house, or I was going on vacation, or I was doing all these other things. I got caught up in the day-to-day events that I neglected what I should have been doing every single day. We get so busy that we forget to acknowledge and obey God. And I think we can all admit that. I think if we're honest, we can all admit that, including me. Look at another lesson that David learned in Psalms 119 and verse 32. It says, I will run the course of your commandments, for you shall enlarge my heart. Teach me, O Lord, the way of your statutes, and I shall keep it to the end. David learned to put the course of obedience first. God, I'm going to remember the course, to obey your commandments. I'm going to follow you. Before I put anything else in my life, I'm going to put the course of obedience first. I'm going to obey you. David and the rest of Israel failed to keep God's commandment and ended up dishonoring God by throwing him on the back of a cart. He's luggage. We'll use him when we need him. They neglected the relationship they had with him. And Satan wants us to forget about the course of God's commandments, and he wants us to put the cart before the course. Just go ahead and keep God with you. Take him everywhere you go. But remember, life is busy. You got to get wrapped up in life. You got vacations. You got family. You got things that need to be fixed around the house. You got this, you got that. And God understands life happens. Go ahead, live life. Just go ahead and put God on the cart. That way he's there for you when you need him. But David says, no, I'm going to keep the course first. And if I keep the course first, you'll never end up on a cart. Because I will always exalt you in my life. Because I'm going to keep the course of obedience. And I'm going to follow you first. If you'll put the course first, there will never be a cart. You will always exalt God in your life if you will stay focused on the course of obedience with God. Today, I just want to put out a warning to all of us. We can easily get our minds off of spiritual things. Satan's good at what he does. Understand that he's powerful, and he's good at what he does. We can end up using God as a piece of cargo and pull him out in the times of crisis when we need him, but neglect him the rest of the time. We are capable of this. I've done it. You've done it. We know we're capable of this. We need to take some time out with God before we begin the events of every day. You need to consider him in the middle of the day and end your day with him. Remember, your relationship with God is the greatest relationship you have. It's an incredible relationship. But if we don't be careful, we're going to end up carrying God around in our life on a cart. Just using him for the crises, but never using him on the day-to-day relationship. You've got to put the course first. Put the course first. He wants the people outside of his family to see that we love and honor him, and that he truly is worthy to be praised and exalted in our life. He wants that. And he wants them to see that he is good and that he loves them, and he wants them to be brought into his family also. As children of God, we need to make sure that God is high and lifted up. Now, I don't know how you're doing with that today. I know how I'm doing with that today, and you know how you're doing, but all we know is personally. Is God exalted in your life? Or is he on a cart right now? I've just been worried about a lot of things. Why? Well, because I feel like I'm out of control. Grab the guy who's not. He's not out of control. He's in control. What are you worried about? He's still with you. The problem is there's a good possibility he's sitting in a cart rather than walking next to you, rather than being exalted in your life. How you get through the problems in life, the world is looking to see the celebration that you're going down the road with. Are you celebrating a God who's in storage? Or are you celebrating a God who is high and lifted up in your life? God did what he did that day because all these nations observing the children of Israel are observing a relationship that won't work. They need to be seeing a relationship that will work. A God that is high and lifted up, not a God that you pull out in the times of trouble, but a God that's with you in the center of it all. God's changed his temple. It's not a building, it's a heart. It's in you and it's in me. And he needs to be in the center of that temple, not on a cart that you're carrying around through life. I don't know how you're doing this morning. I don't know what we're struggling with, but I'm telling you, God's got it under control. He can do it. And God is long-suffering. All those people should have died that day. If you look at it, like, man, that's a lot of mercy and compassion, because they all should have died, and he only took one person out because they were missing it. My prayer is that wherever we are in life, you get caught up in life, I get caught up in life. And sometimes the day-to-day activities do overwhelm us. You might wake up in the morning and then you go to bed that night and you didn't think about God once. But he's right there to go through the day with you. People need to see him with you in life. High and exalted, high and lifted up. How are you getting through the struggle that you're getting through so well? Because I'm exalting him. I know a guy, and he's right here with me through this struggle. Shouldn't you be crumbling under the circumstances in your life? Well, I used to. But I took God out of the cart, and now I'm going to hold him up so the whole world can see this is your answer. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what the struggles are in life right now, but I'm telling you there is an answer. Exalt him and let the world around you see Jesus is the answer. He is the answer. Exalt him and put the course before the cart. Stand with me this morning. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for